with that, I'm going to introduce our guest for this evening, who I see most of you probably already know him. But Jeff McConnell is a dear, dear friend of the Halide Project. As I mentioned, he has another solography workshop coming up. He's done a couple for us in the past, which is awesome. And he's also taken workshops with us. And so in keeping with kind of that horizontal learning vibe, he's also kind of a mainstay of the Experimental Photo Festival in Barcelona, which is amazing. And he's best known for his lensless work, and particularly, like I mentioned, the solography work, which he does solo, but also in collaboration. So he can now tell you more about his work.
Okay, so hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I will start by saying that I'm such a Zoom amateur and I'm not looking at the lists, but I did peek, and it's nice to see some of your familiar names there. And now I will try to share my screen. I don't remember how this works.
You want me to talk? Oh, no, you did it. You did it.
Did it work? Can you see it? Oh,
it
but
did.
you know what I'm supposed to do is play this like so.
Yep.
There, is that
there
good?
You go. Perfect.
Rock and roll. So do the clickers work? They do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is tell a story of kind of how I got to where I am with regard to making photographs. And before we dive back into the past, I want to say again, thank you to the Halide Project for being. I'm so great to see the Halide Project thriving. And this picture, which I decided to put at the front, is a solograph image of the building where the Halide Project is now. And so if you ever have a chance to go, then I would highly recommend it, because they have a really nice dark room and lots of workshops and exhibitions, and it's a true asset to Philadelphia. So I'm grateful to have been invited here. And beyond Philly, obviously, with this outreach, which has turned into such a nice thing. But for myself, I did live in Philadelphia a long time ago. I was doing photography for a while, and then I kind of washed up at Tyler at the end of the 90s. And I was kind of a street photographer, carrying a camera around, trying to pay attention. And while I was there, what I ended up doing, these are just a couple of images from what I was doing at the end of the time I was in Philly, was taking a 2x3 view camera with the wrong lens on it and putting it on a tripod and photographing. And actually, a friend of mine recently reminded me that I did something like this too, where I sat on the street corner of Broad and Erie from before sunrise until well after sundown, manually clicking the shutter every 15 seconds just to make this film, which I kind of always wanted to digitize it. And then Sam reminded me, and I was like, oh yeah, where's that film? And it's fun to see it after all these years, and also connects with other things that I ended up doing later. But I was at Tyler, and there, my professor, I put in a slide here about Martha. Martha Madigan was sort of the main advisor to the program when I was there. And this is some of the work she was doing at the time I was there, which was a lot of kind of multi-layered photograms on printing out paper. And she had been in Philadelphia since the 70s and was kind of a adventurer of alternative process photography, which wasn't really what I was doing, obviously, up until that point. But as I was almost out of there, I think I had finished already, and I was still hanging around because I had access. And I was getting frustrated because I wanted to take panoramic photographs and I didn't have the camera for that. And she said, well, why don't you try pinhole? And I didn't want to do pinhole photography because I thought this meant you had to take your paper in an oatmeal can and run into the darkroom every time you took a picture. But I decided, well, maybe she's onto something. It was about the angle of view that you could get. And so I did some math because I thought, well, I'll do this if I can use film. And I've made a film camera with the curved film plane. This is the diagram for the 120, the smaller one that came later. But after bunging together some foam core into a camera and putting ortho film in it, and that's what this was, I decided, okay, there's maybe something can happen here. So I took an old box brownie, cut it in half with some snips, and fabricated a film carriage out of litho plate. And my friends from across the hall in the metals department made me shutters and a viewfinder. And one of the professors was really offended that I put a viewfinder on a pinhole camera, but I thought, everybody can do what they want. And I took this camera with me traveling. I had another project that was supposed to be the main focus, but after I got back, some of the images that came out of that camera kind of interested me more than kind of what was going to be the next step after those vignetted to a circle street photographs that I had been doing. But the format is problematic. I think I got four, let me go back. I got 4 exposures on a roll of 120, and you see in the back of the camera there, it's a pretty wide support, so they're skinny. And it's just hard to compose with that. So I made the next version, which was 6x12. And around this time, I moved from Philly to New York. And I was looking for work and going around showing a bunch of really wide panoramic pinhole photographs to people, most of whom thought I was kind of nuts. They're like, why are you showing me this? These were all, studio commercial photographers. But one guy got really excited and said, you know what you should do? And he called up a person named Hero, who was kind of a fashion legend of the 1960s, who had just recently been enticed out of retirement. And I ended up working there for 20 years. And that was a different world. But it got me to New York, and he was a good friend. But what did I want to do with these cameras? Again, when my inspiration at the beginning was that I wanted to take sort of panoramic landscapes. And so that's what I did. I put the camera on a tripod, leveled it, and sometimes there were people in the pictures, but other times not. And I found a quote somewhere along the way from Atshay, who's, when asked why there weren't any people in his pictures, he said, well, by the time I got set up, the people all left. And so my concern wasn't really with getting people in the frame at that point. But sometimes they were there. And I think I kind of discovered by accident all the things that pinhole photography can do, mostly just because of the long exposures. And I was not really showing this to anyone. I finished school and kind of got on with my life and did not try to reach out and network about photography at all for about 10 years or maybe longer. And so I just brought the camera with me whenever I went anywhere, and whenever I had time, I would make photographs, and I worked them. They were all done on color film and then scanned because I didn't have a good way to print. Until I ended up out in New Jersey, and around 2013, by then I, made a family, had a couple of kids, and here's the second one when she was just learning to walk. And I thought, my siblings had gotten me into social media. There must be other people out there doing this stuff. And maybe I don't always have to make pictures with this one camera. So there's a person named Peter Olpe, who was a professor in Switzerland, and he published a really interesting book with lots of examples of cameras that he designed and made. And I decided to try that. And as you can tell, I know at least one of you is familiar with these things, I over-engineered it. I wanted there to be a shutter that didn't move the camera, so I grafted a brownie shutter onto there. Long story short, I didn't take very many pictures with that because I had started trying the ones that other people made. And there's a guy named Elvis in Slovenia who ran his first Kickstarter, and he's still in business making cameras with the name Ondu. And so I got one of those and really liked it a lot. But I was still doing more or less the same kind of work, just with a different formats. There were other cameras too. This was around this time I got concerned that there was not going to be film anymore, because I noticed the film stocks disappearing. And so I took a workshop and learned how to do wet plate. And I had an ambitious goal to do wet plate farmers portraits, and I actually did some. And this was one day when I was going to shoot this particular guy with collodion, and I followed him around and photographed him, and I like this photograph a lot. And the wet plate turned out to take so much time that I let it go because I was too busy with kids. Another thing that happened around that time was reaching out to other people doing pinhole. I went on a trip once to meet a bunch of strangers, and some of them turned out to make a difference in my life. And one of them was someone named Todd Schlemmer, who lives in Washington State, and he's good at computers and 3D printing and camera design. And so I finally decided to try one of his cameras because it had a different focal distance than the ones I was using, and I wanted to try doing portraits with it. But I wanted a shutter that you could use a cable release with, and the one he had, you had to link it with your thumb. So I asked him, can you make a shutter that I can use a cable release for so it won't jar the camera so much? And he did that. And then I got bolder and said, could you make a camera that was 6x9 instead of square? And he made one of those, and I took it out and tested it. And by this point, I was inspired to get off the tripod and see if I could make pictures, while everything's moving. And I kind of liked what I was getting, but the camera had this perennial light leak. And sometimes, like this one, I still don't mind it, but many of them, it just killed it. So this was about 2015, I guess. And so then camera went on the shelf until it sort of bubbled back up and it was time to fix it again. And once I finally figured out how to solve that light leak, we had an election and people went outside and started waving signs in the air. And so I thought this would be a good chance to try and make some images. And I was working in New York anyway, most days, so it was easy to go in there. But I was curious to see, what if I could get any good pictures with a pinhole camera in a chaotic situation like that. And whoops, wrong button. It sort of worked, and I was happy with the pictures. And then I got a chance to put them up somewhere and had to figure out how to print them. And negatives from pinhole cameras can be difficult to print. And while it's theoretically possible to use all analog methods and make all process prints with this, I scanned the film and then I printed them first as cyanotypes. And then I got concerned about how well they were going to last. I mean, toned, they weren't going to, I have prints that look almost like this, but these are Van Dyke Brown prints. Let's see, here's a different thing. There's someone named Ray Panduro who lives in Mexico. And I'm not sure if he still does much with pinhole photography, but he made this camera design. And again, I already had some cameras. Do I need another one? But I was intrigued by the lightweight cardboard camera. So I decided I would try it with a circular mask. And the design, you can still, it's hard to find online, but if anybody wants it, write me and I'll send you the PDF because it's a good design. And I made it kind of on a lark and I liked the picture so much that I still carry it around with me until now. But it was kind of both reaching back to the circular format that I was using in Philly when I was working with that little baby view camera. But also I found out that the first Kodak camera, which you push the button and they do the rest, it made round pictures in 1888. This one here, this is part of, there was a blog that was up and I think it's still there. Some of the people I first met when I started reaching out into other people doing pinhole photo had this blog called Pinhole Obscuro, and they enrolled me to contribute. And so I would find weird stuff to photograph and make posts about. And this one was Richard Serra exhibition in New York, and this was dedicated to John Cage, and I like John Cage, so I made the picture and posted it. If you've never been there, you should go. It's such a strange and enormous thing, and it's really hard to photograph that because it's so big. This was taken at Monte Alban, which is near Oaxaca in Mexico. And now we come to solar graphs. So maybe everyone knows, but I'll tell it anyway. What this is an image that includes the passage of the sun across the sky. You sort of analogous to lumen printing. You take photo paper and put it in a camera and you put it somewhere for a while. and then the apparent path of the sun and all the light that comes from it creates kind of a latent negative. This was one of the first ones that I did, sort of the end of 2014. I got inspired by two friends of mine who had done a lot of them. One was Jesus Hoglar, who lives in Barcelona, and the other is Joanna Moore, who lives up in Maine. And they both counseled and advised me. And when some of the first ones I put up were interesting, some of them were dismal failures, of course, because that's how it works. But here's an example. This is a workshop slide, but that's the negative that you get. So I always say it's kind of like when you leave your test strip scraps out and then you turn on the lights and they turn brown. Well, the camera makes the image there, and then you somehow capture that and invert it. And you can use all kinds of photo paper for this. Jesus told me that he liked Ilford Warmtone, and so for a long time that's mostly what I use, and it always gives you blue pictures. And the colors that come out are kind of there in the images, but it's hard to explain why. Jesus is a research chemist, and it really bothered him, so he has theories about it that have to do with like the buildup of light on the chemical reaction. And I think humidity and all sorts of other magic comes in too. But for those, the cameras were at first almost completely soda cans, which I took from the recycling and cleaned up and made cameras out of. And I put labels on them with my website on it at first, until, you know, you sometimes the cameras disappear. Sometimes geocachers will leave you notes. A couple of times I had to interview myself with the police, but mostly it works. And I seeded these things all around the area where I live, hundreds and hundreds of them, and made a big project out of those. And I still make them sometimes, not as much as I used to. This one's fairly recent. If you decide to make these things, then you'll rapidly discover that part of the problem is, where's the camera going to be? You need a place. You got to know where the sun's going to be, and you got to know what you want your subject to be. And then you have to sort of be able to predict what your camera shape is going to do with the scene, just like any other pinhole photography, basically, because they don't have to be canned. Some you can make them flat too. This one is a picture made in a treehouse, and probably just one camera sitting there with multiple pinholes in it. Oh, and then there's a place down in South Carolina where I've put a lot of cameras in the woods, and I don't go down there very much. So this one was there for a year or two. But for urban environments or other, sometimes not only in cities, but definitely in cities, I usually use film cans, or little Altoids tins are good too. Something small that's unobtrusive. And I put them outside of your eyesight, and they survive better now. I think I usually lose about 10%. And it's sad when you have one that you put there and you walk by it every so often and you see it, you're like, just a little longer. And then the last time you go back to take it, it's gone. This is a place I keep going back to. There's the Flatiron. It'll come back again in a minute. And this is looking the other direction in Madison Square Park in New York. And this one's from Philly. Since I started doing the Solargraph workshops at the Halide, I always come down there beforehand and drive around sticking cameras up. And then on the last day when we were going to scan them, I go around and pull them down and use those as demos. And this one, I was really happy because when I lived in Philly, I always liked this statue of Don Quixote. And it used to face an old ruined brewery, which I think is gone now. But again, I was lucky that there was a pole that was in the right spot that I could silhouette him and still get the sun in the picture. We'll come back to solars in a bit, but I want to throw out a greeting to Oaxaca Estenopeca, some of whom I think are watching maybe, although I'm not looking at the list. But what year was that? That was 2017, like the year before that. They have a pinhole photography festival that they've been doing for, I guess last year might have been the 13th or the 14th year. And one year they had Eric Renner and Nancy Spencer coming. And so I wrote down there, I said, I really would love to come, but I'm going to do something else. And they wrote back and said, well, why don't you come next year and do a workshop and put up some pictures? So I went, and I would highly recommend you all get on a plane and go there, because it's expanded from being Pinhole Week to, Pinhole 6 weeks and counting. And they have exhibitions all around, workshops, and it's really a great thing. But so what we did here was, some of you know that I was inherited a vast amount of photo paper, which I tend to hand out to people. And I took some of it down there, and we made big cameras in the brilliant Mexican sun, and developed them in Caffenol in a very, very dim darkroom. But we had a lot of fun with that. And I was able to meet some really great people. So that was sort of opening a big door. There's been other chances too, but this was a really important one. Back to these street, the protest pictures, the ones in the bottom picture on this slide, they were all Van Dyke Brown pictures from various things in 2016. I was interested in the way the people appeared in the frame, and I wondered, could I sort of isolate one person in a picture like that? And to do this, I decided to make a long lens camera, like a telephoto pinhole. And after a couple sort of thoughts and tests, I decided to make a camera that was 6x7 roll film back, and 300 millimeters, which is pretty long. And in order for this to work, there is some small amount of math involved. You sort of need an aperture that's going to get enough light to your film in enough time that you'll get something. And so this camera ended up being an f150. And to get that, I had to polish this nail and make a 2 millimeter pinhole. And originally, I thought I was going to put it on a tripod. And so the first few rolls of film were horribly fogged because the tripod screw wasn't sealed on the other side, and I forgot about that. But in any case, it became clear immediately that I could not use a tripod while walking around doing street photography. But again, I wasn't sure what I was going to get. With these kind of projects, usually I'll sort of have the idea, well, what if I do this? And then sometimes it means I have to make a camera, and sometimes not. But that's one of the great things for me about this kind of photography, is that if you want to do something, for example, this doesn't really, I guess in this case, it almost has to be this blurry because he was moving and so was I. But pinhole photography doesn't have to be this soft. Look back to the very first ones, they were much sharper. But I didn't know what I was going to get. So I made the camera, started shooting, took a lot of pictures, and it seemed like something was happening there, something was worthwhile. So I kept shooting. And let's see. Yeah, this particular guy, I remember him because he came walking across the street, and he's like, "What is that thing? That looks like the thing that catches ghosts in Ghostbusters." And I said, "Well, thank you very much. And maybe that's what it is. And I'll keep your story." And about street photography, for sure, it's a thing about dealing with the people that you meet. And I've heard a lot of conversations about this, and it's kind of whether to take the picture or not to take the picture. And usually, the feeling is nice between me and whoever's wandering around. Once in a while, people complain, and I always tell them, well, I'm terribly sorry, and I won't use the image. But I think that for me, at least, I just go out and look and take the pictures first, because if I stop and talk to them, then the picture's never going to happen. Especially these things. Like this guy would be almost across the street from me. It was kind of a long distance to the subject. But yeah, so this was midway through this, I knew that there was a chance that I could put it up in an exhibition. And so there's 2 pictures from different shows here. And I really thought it was a good thing to see a lot of these pictures together, because they really weren't meant to be seen in isolation. They were sort of more of a dialogue of people living in the space. And I needed a name for them. And I'm a fan of a Argentinian writer named Julio Cortázar. And I like many of his books, but one of the really short and kind of elegant ones is called Cronopios Infamas. And it's almost like fables or parables about these sort of categories of people. And the Cronopios were the ones who kind of lost their keys and missed the bus and stopped to look at the flowers. And so I thought, well, maybe these people are Cronopios, because I thought they were sort of specific enough that you could see that here's a guy with his whatever he's carrying walking in the street with in the city with cars behind him, but we don't know who he is, which gives us a chance to kind of get in there and imagine ourselves there, perhaps. At least this is what I hoped for. And so I asked my friend, one of them there in the picture on the top, he's like, is it okay to call this Cronopias? And he was so enthusiastic that I did it. And the one there on the left is down in Patagonia. They had a photo festival there and they gave me this great big wall, but there was no way to get the prints there and know that I would get them back. So I had really inexpensive posters prints made and just posted those up. And so I was grateful again for the opportunity. Here's a project that I haven't really shown too much. And it took me right back to where I didn't want to do pinhole in the first place because I had to load each camera individually and then go into the darkroom. But I've been living for almost 20 years now here in the forest of New Jersey. And I didn't live in the forest before with giant trees all around. And it's pretty nice to watch them through the year. And so I made some cameras out of old tins and started pointing them directly up. And then the question is, what are you going to do with these photographs? And I tried printing them as positives, and I decided that I like them as negatives better because that's what comes out of the camera. You know, you have this paper negative and you process it, and then there it is. And it looked kind of like that, except it wasn't blue. But my friend Byron, who I saw on the list there, so hi Byron, I went to his place one time and he had these beautiful cyanotype landscape photographs that he had made. And I was like, what? How did you get that color? Because my cyanotypes never looked like that. And he said it was Mike Ware's recipe. So I had to buy more chemicals and I bought great big black concrete mixing tubs from Home Depot or one of those places. And these made some big prints. And then without knowing where they were going to go at first, they ended up in a show in Germany with Diana Pankova, who also had double exposed pictures of trees that were kind of different. And I thought this really worked pretty well. But this sort of collaboration happened all after we already started another one. Both of us had been involved in an exhibition that Marcus Kessler put together in Heidelberg. And he has another one coming in the spring next year, I believe. So there's another, if you're in Europe, you can go and check it out. But we were both involved in the, what year was that? 2019, maybe, in the show that was there. And since both of us made solar gas, we talked beforehand and said, well, maybe we should try some sort of exchange. And so the first step was we put out a bunch of cameras in Heidelberg. So the left side of this picture is somewhere in Heidelberg. And then I got on a plane, went to Mexico and brought the cameras there, and across Pinhole Day that year, planted them around wherever I was, which was mostly this building on the right is called Casa San Agustin, which is a fantastic art center, which was created by Francisco Toledo. And they always have events there during this, Semana Estelopeca, but not only then, it's a fantastic venue with lots of really great exhibitions. But this was one of the first of these kind of, it's sort of like a film swap of solographs. Here's another of the really early ones. This church is right around the corner from where I live, and the other picture is from Minsk in Belarus. Here's one. This lake that you see reflecting there is just down the hill from my house in New Jersey. And the landscape, I mean, the buildings are all from Denmark. And this is Oriental photo paper, which seems to have vanished during COVID, but at least 8 out of 10 times you get red sun. Not always. It's weird to know why, but and here's the flat iron again. But we both, are sort of explorers of making solographs and looking for good images there, and then to sort of throw double exposing them together creates possibilities and chance. And it depends, sometimes they're planned, but the thing about it is with solographs, at least, you can plan all you want and it might not work. So there's an awful lot of chance involved. And so that's a project that's ongoing. And I think, oh yeah, so we made these things. We didn't tell anybody we were doing it for, like a year or so. And then during COVID, there's this pinhole photography event that's been happening every year for a while now in Kyiv called Pavlovka Pinhole Fest. They had a gallery first. And so I had sort of hoped to go because I had, interest in going to that part of the world anyhow. And then Yulia decided to have Pavlovka Fest during COVID. And I thought, well, if I can make it, then I will. So fortunately, I managed to get there, and we put up a bunch of these pictures for the first time. And by now time has flown, and that was a couple of years ago. So this will be the last sort of distinct body of work that I'm going to put on the screen and show you about. It's kind of, I'm pretty much done shooting these, but I have a whole lot of them, and I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do with them yet. They've been shown in a few different places, sort of like part of these group shows that exist, but I'd still like to figure out the printing. But this it's kind of like a continuation of the Chronopias almost, but it's a different format. I saw somewhere online that somebody was making pinhole photographs on Instax Square film, and I had the Instax Mini, which was great for snapshots and taking pictures of kids' performances and giving them out, but I didn't really want to do that with pinhole. But when I saw the Square one, I thought, well, the size of the image and the format had potential. And I have a friend who is friends with lomography somehow, and so she had an extra one of these cameras, and she said, would you want to have that? And so I said, thank you very much, of course. And she sent it to me, and it had a pinhole setting on it and a lens. But I tried it, and it was a bit too long. It needed something, so it sat there on the shelf for a while. And then finally, I went to Harbor Freight, found a little drill press saw blade, and hacked the barrel down shorter, and grafted a different pinhole into it just so that it would be sure to get enough light there, because for walking around in the street taking pinhole photographs, you kind of need, I think the aperture, like the largest aperture, there's two. There's like f150 and maybe f100. So it's pretty, and helpfully the Instax film is bright. But I really enjoy these things a lot because, I found pretty quickly that to get interesting images, it didn't work on an overcast day. But I really like the motion comes not only from the subject moving, but from me moving, and then you get trails of whatever's happening around there. And so I can't stop myself from making them. They remind me so many different things, but I suppose it's better for the viewers to decide for themselves. But I just went and did a talk somewhere else, and someone asked me a question, and it sort of spurred me to think, well, where does the ideas come from? And I still have like 5 or 6 other things that I'm wanting to do. And the next thing that I know I'm actually going to do has to do with motion picture film. And I've got the stuff for it. I just haven't found the time to make it happen yet. Here's a guy who really wanted to engage with the camera, so I took his picture there. Once in a while, I get someone who tells me that they want to be a model, and will I photograph them? And I always do, because why would you say no to someone like that? But I think, well, and I give them postcards. It's like, I'm not sure that what I'm doing is what you have in mind, but please write to me if you want. This guy wasn't one of those. But yeah, that's like a long spiel about what I've done with cameras without lenses. It's strange to talk to the empty room and have no feedback, but I'd love to hear questions. And thank you for your attention. Here's me on North Broad Street, which I found when I was digging the other ones.
If people have questions, they could pop them into the chat, or there's a raise hand function. So if you want to ask with your actual voice, you can do the raise hand, and then I can allow you to turn on your mic if you'd rather do that. But feel free to put comments into the chat as well, because I'll get a transcript of the chat when we're done. So if you have anything that you want to share with Jeff, questions obviously, but even just comments about his work, you can put them into the chat, and then I'll share the transcript with him afterwards. So I thought it was great. Like, I had never seen a lot of your older work, so it was really cool to see that and kind of all of the steps along the way. Like, obviously I'm familiar with your solography work, but to see your other stuff was really, really interesting and inspirational too. Like, building cameras to suit your needs or like what you're envisioning. I thought that was great.
It's funny to look back and see them all because, at the beginning, I think I built one because I kind of thought I had to, like I didn't know that you could buy any. And now you can buy so many, which is great, but you can also make them, and you can still do that thing that everyone, associates with being a kid, and make oatmeal pinhole cameras, which is there's like one of my favorite people in the social media pinhole world is a guy down in Argentina named Fefo Veloso. I don't know if you know him, but he likes to post poetic odes to the simplicity of pinhole, and he does things like makes wet plate collodion pinhole photographs, but he also will take a paper bag and use that as a pinhole camera.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, it's so democratic, anyone can do this, there was someone who I didn't mention named Carlos Jurado, who was a really influential educator in Mexico. And he started the first photographic degree program in Mexico and was a big kind of agitator for pinhole photography and created this amazing mythical story about that. But part of that was, this, we don't need Kodak necessarily. You can just do what you need to do, which I really like.
Yeah, I guess you can make it as complicated as you want, right? You could do a very simple version with the oatmeal can, like you're saying, or you could be doing wet plate with it. So, like, there's a big
Or you could be
range.
like, what's his name? Like, I guess Michael Wesley. His pictures weren't pinhole, I don't think, but with the very long time lapse pictures of like MoMA in New York or Brandon Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, where it's like it's a long, very carefully controlled, long exposure photographic project, or you can just not know what you're getting, and it's a big sandbox we can all play.
Bridget has her hand up, I think, right? Yeah, so Bridget, you should be able to talk now. Use your mic.
Hey there, Jeff. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Bridget.
How you doing? This was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
My question was about well, I'm really intrigued by the street photos and how, like, at least in my experience, it feels like probably like 95% of street photography tends to be about the fast shutter speed and capturing the quick moment. And I was just kind of curious whether was your work sort of a maybe tongue-in-cheek or a response to that, or do you think it just more came out of the fact that you've been working with Pinhole prior?
It wasn't a comment on sharpness versus blur. I think it's more kind of another way of seeing, and maybe about one of the things that is kind of hard to escape with pinhole photography, I think, is that you're engaging with time in a different way, because obviously cameras will record time, and photographic materials evolved until one didn't have to sit with a head brace in order to get an image. But I think that pinhole cameras, using pinhole cameras, enables you to collect more time than you can see with your iPhone picture, or probably even with your eyes, because our eyes don't show us the blur of people moving. And there's people like this Russian Alexei Titarenko. He I think that's his name. He moved to New York, but he had a book that was, you could see pretty easily, which had a lot of time, long exposures made kind of with a Hasselblad or something like that. And so, it doesn't have to be pinhole, but I think for me, it's partly the simplicity of it. It's like I can just decide, okay, I want a camera that'll do this, and then instead of wondering if Nikon made a lens like that, I can just make it. And sometimes they don't work, but I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thanks.
asking.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. There are some questions and comments in the chat. So Herschel is wondering if you ever went back to try to fix the tripod mount on the 300mm pinhole camera.
I think I just taped it over, because originally I thought that in order to have the picture, I guess I don't know what I wanted. It's like you're kind of feeling your way and you make the thing and you see how it works. And I imagined that I would sort of station myself like Philip Lorca de Corsia and catch people as they came by, but I'm not sure that I had enough patience for that. So had I kept it on the tripod, then it wouldn't have been necessary, because I think what I did when I first noticed that was just stuck a quick release plate on there because it filled the hole. And then I think later I, opened the thing up and stuck a piece of gaffer's tape on it. But yeah, there was no need, because very quickly it became obvious by working with the thing. Like, I don't know, like for me, you have each kind of camera you're going to use, and there's all kinds of them, and depends what you want to do with it, and depends the camera itself. It kind of wants to be a certain way. And that's why I think, any kind of art making is really interesting like this. You can give people the same materials and different things will come out. Like if I gave you this long 300mm pinhole camera, then you would make completely different pictures from me. But yeah, I just sealed it up.
Cool. Well, Melanie is wondering how long your solography exposures are and if you prefer a certain time of year. And she did solography with her students for the first time last year, which is awesome. And they like the results, but she'd want to tweak a couple things. So she's curious about your
Well, they
length.
vary widely. I mean, at the beginning, I kind of had it in my head that the cameras should go up at the solstice and come down at the equinox, or vice versa. And so I made a whole lot like that. And then after a while, you sort of get used to the fact that, well, okay, if you put the camera out for that length of time, then you're going to see this much of a sun rainbow in the sky. And you learn like, well, if you point it this direction, what do you get? And for me, it sort of became a graphic question, because when you have a solograph with that amount of sun in it, then that curve in the sky is part of your image. And do you want that? And you can control that. You can sort of make your exposure for one day or a week or a month. And depending on what time of year it is, it's different. Depending where you are in the world, it is. Like that one, there was only one from Mexico on there, but the sun in Mexico just kind of goes straight up. And because it's a different, what's the word? Latitude. So I guess the answer is, of course, it matters, and you can control it. And once when I was working on a hero shoot, and we had this woman who was the digital computer tech, and we were waiting for the sun, and she pulled out her phone and showed this app that showed you where the sun was going to be. And I was like, oh, can I have that? So I started using that, which I've sort of gotten disdain from a couple of people for that, but I don't mind. You can look at, if you live there, then you know where the sun's going to be. But if you're traveling, or if you don't live there, or if, my sense of direction is terrible. So if I go to even to New York City, where there's kind of a grid of streets, I still need help to know, like, well, where's the sun going to be? Yeah, there's people doing these things. In fact, like the origins of solograph as we are doing it now came from two guys in Poland and a Spanish guy who went to visit, and they all kind of got together and said, well, what about this? And soon after that, there became a project, and I think the website's still online. And part of the goal was scientific. Like they were making these pictures from different places around the globe, and then all the pictures would be tagged with their latitude and longitude. So if you're curious about that, there should be a lot of information on the web. As for me, I kind of always just wonder, well, is it a good picture or not? And it's interesting to know all these details, but if you see a picture where there's nothing happening, then, it's not as interesting to me, perhaps.
We have a couple more comments and questions. E. Robson loves your wonderful variety of techniques and projects, and was inspired particularly by the solargraphy collaboration and the deliberate inclusion of movement in your portraits. And Kai Lewis says, great talk. And that was lovely seeing some of your work again. And Dulce has a question. She comments that your work was very, very inspiring. And she says, I've seen solar graphs, but not with this fantastic definition. Can you achieve it by working with the pinhole? So I think you are working with pinhole cameras.
I mean, when I first decided to try doing pinhole photography, Martha in Philly told me, she said, don't worry too much about the size of the pinhole. Just look at it on the light table and make it as perfectly round as possible. And the solar graphs that I have made don't hold a candle to some of the ones that I see coming from Poland, where they somehow have mystic things in their cameras that enable everything to be perfectly sharp. I don't know how you do that. But I think what I do, at least with these, and also people do it different ways. Like I usually just take a can and make a hole in it with a needle. I don't make the pinholes separately and glue them in. I do it with film cans because they're made out of thick plastic and you kind of have to. But it matters a lot with pinhole photography in general, not only solar graphs. How is your hole and what do you use to make it in? Like if you make your pinholes in soda can metal, it's softer, it's thicker. I usually use shim stock, brass shim stock, but I know people who think that that's too messy and they use some kind of, I don't even know what, but in the end, there will be an image. And if you want to try to do this, then just make some. It's like, this is the best advice is like, everyone's experience is going to be different. And you could take one of my cameras and go and put it on a tree and somehow it would make a different kind of picture. But yeah, for better definition, typically, my opinion at least, is that making the hole perfectly round is important. With solar graphs, like if you're using film, then you can make your aperture smaller. But if you make the apertures too small for solar graphs, then it doesn't work as well. Again, like if I know the camera's only going to be out there for a month or a couple weeks, I'll put the one with the bigger hole. It's 100% subjective, and usually something will happen. You could probably just like take a knife and punch a hole in it and put it out there. And there's slit photography too.
Kai actually has a follow-up question. She's wondering how you envision the color chronopios developing, and how will you produce the images if you exhibit them? Will they remain as install size, or will they become enlarged painterly prints?
Well, I did send them off as digital files to various places where they've been printed out and put on the wall, and I didn't go there, so I don't know. I think some of these images could hold up if they were big. I sort of, with black and white images, you have a lot of choices of making handmade prints, and with color, at least, I'm not going to make giant C prints, so you're kind of stuck with inkjet prints, which have a certain look and feel. I took a class, actually, one of the classes I took at Halide was Lori Beck-Peterson's workshop on gum printing, which was really great. And so that was why I took it, was because I had these pictures and I saw that they were offering this workshop and I hadn't done this process before. And I thought, this could work. And so far, I still don't have, it doesn't look like I would want it to. I'm not giving up. Actually, there's Calvin Greer, I think his name is in Spain, and is coming up with a non-toxic gum printing method, which makes me really interested. And I just saw somebody who went and spent a month in his shop doing carbon printing, but I have not seen when you can get the stuff here. And as soon as you can, I'm going to try it. But yeah, the door's still open. I don't think I'm shooting that anymore. I was doing it for a while, and now I have masses and masses of Instax prints, and I carefully scanned them all and chose the good ones. And but yeah, it's still unfinished project basically.
Kai's also wondering, and I might mispronounce this, if you ever sent solars into Tarja Trij.
Oh yeah, she was one of the ones who was part of that Solaris project. But I mean, I'm connected with her on Facebook. I wouldn't say that I really know her, but I didn't. Is she managing that thing? Kai, do you know? Did you send to it? I don't know. We can talk later.
She could type her answer to that. But while we're waiting for that response, Anissa has a question. She enjoyed seeing your process throughout time and how you adjusted your cameras based on the subject. And she was wondering if you have your pinhole designs uploaded anywhere.
Pinhole designs. Well, I mean, I guess I'm not one of those people who's very good at keeping records. And I have a mess of files. And eventually I sort of decided, well, I should keep track of this just so I'll know what I did because I don't remember. And that keeps getting worse. But for that, I would say like some of the cameras that I use, I did design, and those you can just find. But I believe in open source. So if you're curious, then write to me and I'll tell you whatever I know. I mean, mostly I don't publish anything because I kind of figured that nobody cares. And I'm just making the stuff that is going to get me where I want to go. And then sometimes it doesn't. Like actually that very first big wooden box camera that I made, when I went down to Oaxaca one time, I thought, well, let's see if it still works, because it had inspection windows on the side where you could see the film numbers, and you had to tape the hell out of it every time you used it. So I took it down there and ran a couple rolls of film through it, and there was horrible light leaks. I didn't get one picture that was even usable, never mind a good image. And so I really think my personal experience is that I'm on the river here flowing along, and then a project comes along and I do it for a while. And then if I try and go back and do it again, the flavor is gone somehow. So I still have all these, cameras that I acquired along the way, filling up a cabinet there in my room. But mostly then I get curious and want to try something else.
Stefan's wondering if you have any plans to show that last body of, I think it was the Instax color street photos, that he especially loved those, and was wondering if you have any plans to
Thank
show
you.
them.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, as I said before, it's sort of, I've sent a few of them off here and there. There's been no kind of real exhibition of them anywhere yet. And it would be really great if there was a chance to sort of put something together with a lot of them. I could make another book out of them. I don't even know. I mean, it's at this point, it's kind of still, I think I was shooting, and then editing as I went. And now I kind of stopped shooting and started doing something else. And so I have this massive imagery there that is kind of an unfinished project that could be edited. And life keeps getting in the way. But thanks.
Herschel has a couple comments at the end. One is copper foil, which I'm assuming is what he puts his pinhole.
To make pinholes.
Yeah, and then a reference for a good book for building different types of pinhole cameras by Chris Keeney. It's called Pinhole Cameras, a DIY Guide.
I think I might have it on my shelf and I may not have looked at it.
But if people are wondering or looking for a resource, it's in the chat, so you can grab it from there.
Right. Yeah, there's still, I mean, the pinhole resource, I'm pretty sure that it's still there, because Eric Renner and Nancy Spencer had the pinhole journal for a long time, and they stopped publishing that. But I think you could still like order zone plates from there, and there should be boundless resources on the web. But yeah, if Herschel says it's a good book, then I'm sure it is.
So there are a bunch of other comments, very inspirational talk. I'll share all the comments with you after the fact, Jeff. I'll download them. So again, if anybody
cool.
has any comments that they want to share with Jeff, put them in there and I'll share the transcript. And if anybody has if anybody has last minute questions, Herschel also put a link to pinholeresource.com. So
hi, Herschel. I hope it's a good day down there.
wants to check that out, click on it quick before we hang up. And all right, so if anybody has any questions, throw them in there last minute.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. It's been
wait.
great fun. And thanks, Dale, for inviting me.
Yeah, wait,
I don't
another
know if we're
link.
done, but I can still say that anytime.
There's E. Robson put mrpinhole.com.
Right, I've heard of that too.
And also recommends Japanese beading needles to make nice round holes.
Oh, I would say, like, for me, like the thing that I use to use the calculations for whether it's the right size pinhole is Zero Image. Zero Image is a camera maker. The guy named Zernike, who was like the impetus for Pinhole Day to begin with. And he makes really beautiful cameras, but he also has a nice website with a pinhole calculator on it. And that's what I use. I have like a few other links that I use, which aren't pinhole when it comes to camera design, but I always use that. So good night, Kai.
All right, Kai's checking out. Good night.
Yeah, all the people in Europe, it's late.
Yeah, everybody go to bed. We may be taking a break from Light Talks in December because I'm traveling, but pay attention to the website and social media in case I do like kind of last minutely book someone to speak in December before I head out on my travels. But other than that, hopefully we'll see you in the future online or in person. And thanks to everyone for coming, and especially huge thanks for Jeff for
Thanks
coming.
for inviting me.
Come to his workshop too if you're
come on down to Philly.
Philly.
We'll make holes in some cans.
All right, thanks everybody, and good night.